Is Casey DeSantis, the wife of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, considering running for governor of Florida in 2026? Well, we have all the latest information right here. Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today I'm going over an article by NBC News which talks about the possibility of Casey DeSantis running for governor of Florida in just 2 years. So, in the article by Matt Dixon, in Tallahassee, Florida, Republican donors at a gathering last week in Palm Beach County openly discussed the prospect of Casey DeSantis running for governor in 2026, and for the first time, Florida's First Lady is seriously considering the idea. Governor DeSantis, her husband, faces term limits and cannot seek re-election. There's been long speculation about whether Casey, a mainstay on the campaign trail for her husband, would herself one day run for office. But those plans seem to be coming closer to reality. 5 people directly familiar with the donor event and Casey DeSantis' thought process told NBC News. Quote, "I would say this. I've heard donors have been urging her to run, and that while it's not something she has wanted to do, they are causing her to at least stop and listen," a source familiar with her thinking said. DeSantis could not be reached for a comment for this article. Her entrance into the 2026 Republican primary field, which isn't yet set, would have significant ripple effects across both the Florida and national political landscape, potentially setting up a proxy war between Governor Ron DeSantis and President Donald Trump. The other Republican who has openly said he is considering a run for governor is Representative Byron Donalds, a very close ally of President Trump. It is a real possibility, another person familiar with the conversations said, of the chances Casey DeSantis runs for governor. That might have been a Freudian slip calling her Governor DeSantis. Though they noted that they don't know yet whether it's a probable scenario. Before the South Florida donor event last week, the prospect was mostly political conjecture, but even then, the idea had gotten enough traction that Casey DeSantis had to address it. She said, quote, "I will tell you this, when people talk about me running for governor, I think it speaks highly about the governor himself," she told the Conservative Review podcast in May. "I think when people see me, it's because they are so happy about everything that this governor has done for the state of Florida. When people start talking about, oh, you should run, that's because Governor DeSantis is a rock star, and that's because people are so proud of everything that he's done for this state," she added. Along with Donald, State Agriculture Commissioner Wilton Simpson is also believed to be considering a run, though he doesn't have the national profile of either Casey DeSantis or Byron Donalds. He is a well-known statewide elected official in Florida with upward of $30 million already in the bank from past fundraising efforts. If Casey DeSantis were to run, the race would almost certainly be viewed in part as a proxy war between Trump and her husband. The two became close allies after Trump endorsed Ron DeSantis' 2018 bid for governor, but they had a high-profile falling out when DeSantis ran against Trump in the 2024 Republican presidential primary. The relationship has warmed, but the dynamics of a potential race between the sitting governor's wife and Donald's, widely believed to be the candidate Trump's team would support, would resurrect the rivalry in the fight over who is the true kingmaker in Florida Republican politics. DeSantis and Donalds, interestingly enough, were once so close that Donalds introduced DeSantis and his family at DeSantis' 2022 election night party. The two fell out when Donalds endorsed Trump in the presidential primary. Similarly, DeSantis had a strained relationship with Simpson. Last month, the two men openly sparred after the GOP-dominated legislature proposed a plan to strip DeSantis of immigration oversight authority in the state to give it to Simpson, which DeSantis vocally opposed. Originally, DeSantis wanted former State Attorney General Ashley Moody, a longtime ally, to run for governor. He saw her as the best prospect to beat Donalds, but he ultimately decided to appoint her to the Senate seat left open when Trump picked Marco Rubio to be his Secretary of State. With Moody's exit, DeSantis was forced to find another candidate who was aligned with him who he believed could be governor. The governor sees his wife's running as, quote, as his best opportunity to set the future leaderships for the state and prevent a Simpson or Donald's governorship. Another source familiar with the thinking said that's what finally opened him up to a Casey run. A top Donald's advisor told NBC News about having heard the rumblings of a Casey DeSantis bid for governor, but declined to comment further. The existing tensions between DeSantis and both men make it nearly impossible that DeSantis, the state's sitting two-term governor, would endorse either in a governor's race, and left him searching for his own candidate whom he can support to replace him. DeSantis has already said he would be active in the 2026 governor's race. Last month, DeSantis said he would use a state-level political committee, the Florida Freedom Fund, to back the candidate in the 2026 governor's race. He used that committee last year to help defeat ballot measures that would have legalized recreational marijuana in the state and another that would have enshrined abortion rights in the Florida Constitution. Florida's Freedom Fund was instrumental in raising huge sums of money to defeat Amendment 3 and 4 in 2024. For the 2026 cycle, the FFF will raise even more resources to, one, ensure in support of a strong gubernatorial candidate, and two, to support strong conservative candidates in legislative primaries. It has left many wondering whom DeSantis would end up supporting. The candidate who answers that question may already live in the governor's mansion. Quote, "She's going to run. I think at this point most see that," a person familiar with Casey DeSantis' thinking said. "There's a lot to be worked out, but at this point the rumors are not just that, it's feeling very real." And again, this article was by Matt Dixon, a senior national politics reporter for NBC News who is based in Florida. This is a really fascinating conversation and one that I really cannot talk about enough. 2026, the Florida governor's race, as the article mentioned, the main candidate right now that's running is Representative Byron Donalds. He's been the Republican that everyone has been talking about for this race. He is easily the most high-profile Republican that has expressed serious interest in this race, and he's right now the leader to run. But Casey DeSantis, if she does run for this race, does set up a very interesting possibility of a competitive Republican primary that I think would be really fascinating. One thing that the article did not mention was Matt Gaetz did publicly express interest a few months ago about running for this race. Obviously, he has not said much since then, but Matt Gaetz, the possibility of him running for the governor's race is still out there. I'm not sure if he would run against Donalds because they both are very close friends of President Trump, and they probably would speak beforehand about running for governor rather than run against each other. So, but it still needs to be mentioned, Gaetz has mentioned his interest. And there's also the possibility of Donalds and Gaetz running against each other, and then say Casey DeSantis runs, and then the vote splitting between Donalds and Gaetz opens the door for DeSantis to win. But that's a hypothetical situation. I want to talk about a little bit the seriousness of Casey DeSantis' candidacy. Is there any historical precedent for the First Lady of the state running to succeed the governor of the state? I can't name any specific examples off the top of my head, but I do believe the answer is yes. That has happened before. Feel free to leave a comment below if you do have a specific example. But there is certainly precedent for the First Lady of the state running to succeed her husband or vice versa as governor. As for what Casey DeSantis brings for the electability aspect, well, in the only polls that have been done so far, there's been 4 polls conducted. There's only been a few where Casey DeSantis has been polled, but in those polls, she has led in both of them. The Florida Atlantic University Main Street Research Poll, this was conducted back in June of 2024. So again, this really doesn't, is really not too relevant now because obviously that was back in June. That was, coming up almost on a year ago. But in that poll, Casey DeSantis had a very commanding lead over Byron Donalds, who had 19%, Matt Gaetz had 13%, DeSantis had 43%, and that was with Ashley Moody getting 14%, who is not likely going to be running this time around. So in this poll, she had an overwhelming command over the rest of the field. In the University of North Florida poll back from 2023, she also had a pretty sizable lead at 22% to Donald's 9% and Gaetz's 9%. And she hasn't really been polled since June of 2024, so it'll be interesting to see if that does happen, if she does get polled again. But I think it's pretty clear here that in a hypothetical race of Donalds versus Casey DeSantis, it could actually be a really tough political fight that Casey DeSantis may very well end up winning. I know many, including myself, have just assumed Byron Donalds will be the leading candidate for governor and he'll probably win the primary without much contest. But if it's DeSantis versus Donalds, it might be a lot closer than it seems, and DeSantis may even come out on top of that matchup. So this is a very, very interesting scenario and one I definitely want to keep up with and see how it goes from here if she does decide to run for this race. As for how the state of Florida is going to look in the 2026 governor elections, well, we can just look at some election results. This is the House map. I'm going to go to the Senate map in 2024. Rick Scott, the Republican senator, won the race by 12.8%. This would be considered a likely Republican margin. The presidential race, let me pull up the CNN results. Here it is. Trump won statewide by 13.1%. So Florida, both for the president and Senate, voted right around the edge between being a safe Republican state and a likely Republican state. If you want to look at the last time DeSantis was on the ballot, this would have been in 2022. DeSantis was able to win the governor's race by 19.4%. So that is actually a safe Republican win. Then again, 2022 was a very good Republican year, or was supposed to be a very good Republican year, and Florida was one of the states where it actually was a very good Republican year. So as for how things go on the governor's side of things, right now I'd probably have Florida started out as safe Republican. You could really go back and forth between saying likely Republican or safe Republican, but I do think it starts out as safe, and I think Casey DeSantis being the nominee almost certainly keeps it as safe Republican, as a lot of people in Florida voted for DeSantis 2 election years in a row. Having Casey DeSantis run would be a third year in a row, and she would likely win it by over 15% as well. But this is a very interesting conversation, and one that I'm interested in hearing your thoughts about it. What do you think about this potential news? Do you think Casey DeSantis runs for governor? Do you think she'd be able to win the primary if she did? And all that entails with that. So thank you so much for watching. Please remember to give the video a like, click subscribe, come back because I keep posting a video every single day, so make sure you come back for that. Thank you so much for watching, and hope to see you in a future video. That will do it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please remember to give it a like. And if you really liked it, please remember to click the subscribe button. And make sure you turn post notifications on so you always get notified when I post a new video. That way you never miss one. Also, please remember to share this video with your friends and family if you really like the video. And remember to stay tuned because I'll be posting at least one video every single day leading up until Election Day, so I'd really appreciate it if you keep coming back and watching those videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in a future video.